Hello, BookTube. All right, we're at part 2 of our 11K Q&A. Can you believe that? 11K. And we are at Corey Black. Congratulations on 11K. Number 1, do you think reading for fun will die out? Probably not. Probably not. No. Number 2, what are your thoughts on the Neuralink technology? Well, you can guess, right? It is meant to elicit from someone my age exactly the reactions that it does elicit. Inserting through your blood vessels or maybe your up through your nostrils a light neural shawl over the skin of your brain. It's inherently sinister. Like so much of what this guy thinks up or tries to do or advocate, it seems inherently sinister. I am fully on board with the people who say that the age-old question of what it would be like if we had a comic book villain in real life has in fact been answered. Elon Musk is that comic book villain. I can't imagine any normal person ever using any version of Neuralink technology. Naturally, in my imagination, because I've read a lot of science fiction, I can imagine ways that it could be used for good. Imagine if someone has, seizures, really bad seizures, or even mental impairment for one reason or another. Imagine what that kind of technology might be able to do to help them. I'm not blind to that, but it's still inherently creepy. And then number 3, what are the best books about the history of Christianity? Hands down, Dermot McCullough's book, Christianity, the First 3,000 Years. Hands down. It's huge. It's 1,000 pages long, but it's a fantastic reading experience, and there's no competition with it at all. So Maximus Stetich says, Steve, you previously have expressed the sentiment that book-to-movie adaptations are typically better than the books themselves, which makes me curious whether you think cinema has the capacity to achieve the same heights that literature does. Further, what does cinema do better than literature, if at all? What cinema does better than literature is the reason why book-to-movie adaptations are almost better than the books were. What cinema is capable of, what it does better than literature is to strip away the vanities of the author, the misguided vanities and stupid posturing of the author, and get you down to what it is, to the emotional impact of the story. Cinema can do that really well. Cinema has to do that because it can't indulge in the rest of that in any way. Even with voiceover, it's hard to do. But it does that in order to present you with a flat visual production. And that's a strength, but that's also its limitation, because literature doesn't have to do that. Literature's not flat. It's a fog bank. It can move inside you. You can breathe it in. It can change you on the inside, long term. And there's no, despite what cinemaphiles will say, there's no movie that can do that. But maybe not. Maybe I don't understand movies. Maybe that's why I say the movie version of books is usually better. Benjamin Revel says, what are your favorite sci-fi novels? Well, in this case, maybe not surprisingly, my favorite sci-fi novels are going to be some of the highest ranked and best, the ones that make the lists, make it for a reason, and tend to be my favorite as well. Of course, Dune is going to be right up there. The Centauri Device by M. John Harrison never makes any list, but that would be right up there as well. But Neuromancer by William Gibson, Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. Maybe for me, something like The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin as well. But in typically speaking, in any like famous top 10 science fiction novels of all time, typically speaking, in any of those lists, and here I'm talking about modern science fiction. I'm talking about from Asimov on. I'm not talking about the progenitors. Oh, they would rule the list for me. Good Lord, H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, my beloved Jules Verne. I'm talking about from the modern science fiction era, when technology was actually relatively recognizable. Typically speaking, in any list like that, I will love almost all the books that are up at the top, except for Philip K. Dick, who always makes the top of those lists, even though he's terrible. Let's see here. Last Sanchez says, hey, Steve, congrats on 11K. You are now almost enough subscribers to equal the standing army of Nicaragua. Really? I think the standing army of Nicaragua would probably be better in a scrap than my subscribers would be, who mostly just want to stay home and read. My question is, what is the best book by each of Robert Stone, Well, the critical consensus is going to be that his best book is Dog Soldiers, uh, but I like Damascus Gate more. So I'm at odds with the critical consensus when it comes to him, and E.L. Doctorow. Well, okay, be the same thing. The critical consensus will almost certainly say that Doctorow's best book is Ragtime, and I like Ragtime. I like Dog Soldiers as well, but my favorite Doctorow book, by a rather wide margin, is Billy Bathgate. So I'm disagreeing with what I know the consensus is, and just in case you're interested in both. Joe Law 13 or 13 says, "Hey Steve, my question: what sport lends itself best to fiction?" I would say baseball. Probably understandably, since it's so calm and peaceful. It's so sedentary. It's just a bunch of paunchy elderly men strolling around on the grass for a beautiful afternoon. Naturally, that lends itself to fiction. Uh, Orthia NZ says, 11K, well done, Steve. I didn't do anything. I just sit here, I turn on the camera, and I natter like an old coot. I am mystified as to what is going on here. But thank you. I'm currently writing a children's book about my bird's adventures. I'm currently torn between using a real-life experiences and a mixture of that and creative license to tell a good story about him. In your opinion, what would be a good balance? I don't know his adventures. Maybe he has really good adventures, in which case you wouldn't want to admix any fiction at all. Typically speaking, I'm against autofiction, even if it's avian autofiction. So I would say, fictionalize the adventures, fictionalize them, take the real things as sort of a raw paste and then work something out of that. But who knows? Maybe your bird is the James Bond of the bird world. Abirami has a barrage of questions. Thank you so much for this parasocial friendship you've allowed us. I have many questions. I always jokingly refer to this as a parasocial relationship. Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there are actually psychological studies from the 1950s talking about a parasocial relationship where there is a person at one end of an exchange, whether it's a stage show or a radio show or a television show or YouTube, which is the apotheosis of the parasocial relationship. There's a person at one end, and then there's an audience at the other end. And there's the reason it's called parasocial is because there's the illusion of interactivity. And parasocial studies stress the fact that it's an illusion, designed and usually manipulated by the one person at the one end to extract something, usually money, from all of the people at the other end. And that pattern has definitely followed through on YouTube, where virtually everybody on YouTube is trying to sell you something. If you think about it, I don't know how much YouTube you watch, but I watch a lot of YouTube, and virtually everybody on YouTube is trying to sell you something. Whether it's a gigantic YouTube channel that has 5 unskippable ads at the beginning, B-roll, C-roll, end-roll ads, so that they're littered with commercials. Or whether it's a booktuber who has 2,000 subscribers, and yet when you click on their latest video in your subscription feed, you get 2 commercials before you talk to them. That is them trying to sell you something. They might say, no, I just signed up for ads. I'm not trying to sell you anything. But you put ads on your conversation with your subscribers, so you're trying to sell them something. And I always smile a little when the term comes up. And I've used it semi-ironically myself, because this is the weirdest parasocial relationship that you could think of. Because A, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not going to monetize this channel. You're never going to see any ads on it unless YouTube makes me put ads on it. In which case, we will come up with some way to subvert that system. But and B, another aspect of the parasocial relationship is that the person at the one end is falsifying who they are to the people at the other end, and I'm not. So it's always a weird thing to say. But anyway, your barrage of questions. Let's see what you have here. Number 1, do you think reading as a hobby is in decline? It certainly is. I mean, what people lie about statistics on this all the time, and readers are very vocal. But by sheer numbers, fewer and fewer people read books for pleasure. They still surround their days with reading. They're still reading all the time. They've got devices all around them where their eyes are deciphering prose, written prose. And library use is up enormously. At least it was before the pandemic. I don't know about, I don't know recent figures, but in the years before the pandemic, library use was steadily going up. But nevertheless, when polls are done of a large sample audience of do you read for pleasure, do you set aside time to read for pleasure, those numbers are going steadily down. They are a smaller and smaller percentage of the adult population. Uh, Number two, can you share your thoughts on Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows? Do you think that the internet usage is diminishing the ability to focus on long-term prose? It is for some people. The Shallows is an important book. The only problem that I had with it is that it is, if you could search from front to back in that book and a million books like it, these Chicken Little books on social media and the effect of technology on our brains, you can search them until the cows come home, and you will never find the term self-control. It just won't be there. And I understand on a marketing level why that's a good idea. You want to heighten the drama of what you're talking about by telling your audience that they themselves and their kids are addicted to some kind of drug. But social media doesn't. You can turn it off and walk away from it fairly easily. There are no biochemical withdrawal symptoms. And number three, can you give some advice for people who are suffering from a shortened attention span? Yes, I can. You're not going to like it, though. Nobody ever does, because it's boring advice. It's pre-internet advice. Practice. Self-control and practice. Which is the way to get anything. It's the way to improve any feature that you have. Self-control and practice. So if you want, in this case, if you want to improve your shortened attention span, then the self-control will come into play in that you will remove the things that are shortening your attention span. I have said this before, and some of you have responded with absolute incredulity. Like I was suggesting that you strap on wings and fly to the moon, when I am not suggesting something impossible at all. I've suggested that if you think that maybe you are addicted to social media, then tell yourself, okay, tomorrow's Monday. From when I wake up in the morning until the time when I go to bed on Monday, I'm going to check social media once every hour at the top of the hour, and not at any point in between. Email, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, I'm going to check it once every hour at the top of the hour for no more than 10 minutes. People were stunned when I suggested that that's totally impossible. It is entirely possible. And the checking of those kinds of things, those kinds of social media updates, and also rabbit holes on YouTube, are the things that are eating away at your attention span. So the self-control comes in getting rid of the thing that's attacking your attention span. That's step number one. And then the practice comes in doing that regularly until you get your self-control back. It will come back. The ability to pay attention to something without any interruption at all, productively, for 2 straight hours, will come back to you. It might feel like it's gone forever, but only because you're not controlling yourself at all. You can easily do that. You could go whole hog and say, I am going to have a completely productive day. I have the week off from school, maybe I'm working at home and I have the day off. I'm going to have a completely productive day. I have a work in progress that I'm writing. I have a whole bunch of projects that I want to do. I have a whole bunch of people that I want to see or talk to or spend time with. I'm going to do all of that. And in order to do all of that, I'm going to ignore all social media until nightfall. So none of this top of the hour thing. I'm going to ignore it completely all day long to get things done. And then at the end of the day, I will give myself, 20 minutes to answer all the emails, click on all the Instagram updates, look at all the updates on Twitter. I guarantee you that if you did that for a week, it might seem impossible, but you can do it. And if you did that for a week, where it was all day being productive and actually living and doing things, and save all of the social media for the evening after sunset, I guarantee that after a week, you would have no trouble doing that and would wonder why you had ever done anything else. You would look back and marvel at the huge amounts of time that you had wasted just emptily scrolling. How many of you have had the experience that I've read all about, where you start scrolling on some app or other, and you look up and it's 3 hours later? How many of you have had that experience? That's revolting. That's your life that you're scrolling away. Then you don't get any more time than this at all. You're in about 10 minutes. You're going to be dead. And believe you me, those sites, those apps are designed to make you do that. Just resist. Just put it away. Just put your cell phone in a desk drawer and leave it there for a long time. An hour, 2 hours. The world's not going to end, and you'll get a lot done. So my advice is going to boil down, in this case, as in many other cases, to self-control and practice. Let's see here. DDB says, I have a question which may be difficult, but pertinent and helpful to all viewers. Hypothetical. Say I have or know a teenage boy or young man, early 20s. He doesn't read, as so many don't. I want to recommend a book to him that will make him a reader for life. What is that book? It doesn't work that way. Right? It doesn't work that way. Reading isn't magic. It's, again, a question of self-control and practice. So there's not going to be any one book. If there were, I would recommend it, so would everybody else. There's not going to be any one book that changes the indolence of bad habits. You're not going to make a lifetime reader out of someone with one book, because lifetime readers are made by people who have had the experience of loving reading continually reaffirmed. And that's what's necessary. In my experience with 20-something boys who don't like to read, the most effective way to get them to like to read is to show them that you yourself love reading, and that lots of other people do, to show them that, again, I don't mean this to sound manipulative, but to show them that they're missing out on something. There's nothing that a 20-something young man will hate more than being told that something is good for them. They'll resist it even if they know objectively that it is. And there's nothing they hate more than thinking that there's something great in the world that they're missing out on. And that's going to take a series of books, not just one. There is no one magic book. I wish there were, although in this hypothetical, I would be happy to help. I have provided that reaffirmation book after book after book for many young men in their 20s. I've made readers out of many young men in their 20s. Dennis Reddington says, congrats on 11K. Any thoughts on the novels of Javier Marías? Is that how you say it? Marías? I've only read him in English language translation, and they didn't blow me away. Even Embers didn't really do it for me. Vera Pavlova says, congratulations on yet another milestone. What do you think about book club moderators charging money for membership? What? That can't possibly be true, can it? What? There are book club moderators who charge money for membership? What's the money for? Who on earth would pay it? That's ridiculous. No, I'd never even heard of that. I would laugh in someone's face if they suggested that. There are a million free book clubs that you can join. There are millions of them. There are millions on BookTube that you could join. Your library will proctor plenty that are done through Zoom now. There's no reason for that. That's insane. That's sacrilegious. Oh, no. Ray Tostado says, congratulations on 11K. Thank you. Number 1, do you recommend The Codebreaker by Walter Isaacson? I do, but it was a minor work. There's a reason why you haven't seen it, given the Walter Isaacson treatment. Sometimes when he writes a big, major biography, everybody reviews it. Basically, everybody talks about it. Every venue in the world writes about it. And this isn't one of them. This is one of his minor efforts. Very interesting. He can't not be interesting. But there's a reason why you haven't seen it talked about, if you have looked for it being talked about. And there's also a reason why I myself haven't talked about it in print anywhere, because it's not all that interesting. He's a lot more interested in it than he makes it interesting for other people. Always a danger for biographers or historians of any kind, really, is that here's subject X and it's fascinating to me, and what you always have to do, just commercially speaking, is say, okay, but will it be equally fascinating to other people? And if the answer is no, can I make it equally fascinating to other people? And a lot of them, if that instinct fails you, you're going to come out with a book like this, unfortunately. Whereas, like, for instance, what's an example of something that's the opposite? Example of something the opposite would be David McCullough. Years and years ago, he did a book about, what was the name of it? Some of you will know the name of it. He did a book about the phenomenon of how world travel, especially European travel, was suddenly possible again when the Napoleonic Wars ended. And when I heard that description before the book came out, I thought, all right, this is an example of a very practiced historian and biographer coming across the subject and thinking it's really fascinating when it's really not, and when they're not going to be able to convey that fascination to readers. And I was wrong. I'm trying to remember the name of the thing, and I can't remember the name. I think Journey was in the title. But one way or another, the book was incredibly good. It was incredibly good. It was a fully successful version of what I'm talking about, whereas The Codebreaker was not, in my opinion. Let's see here. Oh, you have another question. I miss your large mail hauls. Oh, so do I. Remember those big plastic tubs full of packages, sometimes twice a day? Do you think those days will return when things get back to normal? Well, I've said before, I don't think things are going to get back to normal. I think the world has changed and is not going to change back. But as to mailings, I'm not really sure. I think that might go back up, not to normal, but to something like it. The thing there is that the publicists aren't in their offices; they're not in their cubicles, and for a while there, for a chunk of 2020, there was nobody in the warehouses either, nobody in the shipping docks, and I think that's going to change, right? As people get vaccinated, and as the more and more people, millions, because the country is no longer run by an absolute sociopath who wanted to let it rip. People are getting vaccinated now. Millions and millions of people are getting vaccinated, and those vaccinations, plus the continued rise in cases in hotspots all over the country, means I would guess that sometime around June or July, maybe August, we will have achieved in the United States anyway a combination of immunization and herd immunity that will mean that your chances, your danger of getting this potentially fatal viral infection when you're out and about doing your job with normal precautions like face masks, which I don't think are going anywhere forever for the rest of our lives. If you're doing that, I think more and more companies might say, all right, well, then the danger is as low as it's going to be anymore in this new world. And if that happens, I don't think offices are ever going to go back to normal, but warehouses might, in which case books might start to... certainly I have noticed in, like, for instance, 2021, more and more book publicists and publishers and friends of mine in the industry saying, I'm perfectly happy to send you a finished copy here. Our routine in the last year has shifted to sending people ebooks. But unlike in, for instance, April or May of 2020, where the physical book wasn't even on the cards because there was nobody in the warehouse to send it to you, unlike then, now you absolutely can have a finished copy if you want. I've noticed more and more of that. So it may go back up to normal. Where are you going? What are you doing? If you jump down on the couch, you're gonna upset the camera. Jump down on the couch anyway. She doesn't care. Oh, there you go. There you go. Oh. All right, let's continue here. How are we doing for time? We're fine. Drunzo has a booktube channel. He's a relatively new booktuber. Congratulations, Steve. What are your thoughts on the exemplary stories of Cervantes? Do their merits compare to that of Don Quixote? Thanks in advance. They don't compare to that of Don Quixote, but then what does, right? If they were on the level of Don Quixote, they would have been touted that way for 500 years. They're interesting, very good. I've only actually read them in English, and only in one translation. But I don't think even Cervantes fans would put them on a level with Don Quixote. Let's see. Anastasia B says, congratulations on 11K. If this is not a huge question, could you talk about how one could become an expert of a certain region, both in terms of international relations and history? Extensive reading aside, are there any other steps to the process? Well, that's like saying, healthy eating aside, what are the key ingredients of good nutrition? I mean, extensive reading is 99% of getting accustomed to an area, but also getting to know its physical geography, walking around, getting to know its parameters. Reading is going to be most of it. but also maybe experiencing things. Again, the pandemic complicates things, but it used to be that every place has a historical society, every place has a historical museum of some kind or other. Boston, in certain parts of downtown Boston, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting one of them. Going and looking at everything that those places have to offer was once a great way to do that. I always used to tell people, I had a friend who had something like this same question about Philadelphia. And I said, don't just stop at the museums. Look around for the smaller historical societies. They will be overjoyed to see you. They'll be overjoyed at your enthusiasm. They'll want to help. The pandemic might complicate that, though. Let's see here. Curio says, what do you think about the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft? And can you recommend any books about art theft, both fiction and nonfiction? I think a lot about the Isabella Stewart Gardner theft. It happened, 20 years ago? 30 years ago. And will never be solved. As far as I'm concerned, it will never be solved. Certainly those works will never be recovered. The works that were taken, the thieves had, once they incapacitated the guards, they had the run of the museum for the whole of the night. And you can still see the after effects when you go to the Gardner. The Gardner has a sort of controlled traffic pattern. You go upwards and upwards. It's patterned after a Venetian palazzo, and you travel upward and upward till you get to the upper galleries. And right, the pride of place in one of those upper galleries is an empty frame, where once you could have seen Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, that no one will ever see with their eyes again. You see, thankfully, unlike with, for instance, lost masterpieces of the past, you can still look at these things. There are innumerable photographic representations of them. You don't have to sit and wonder what Storm on the Sea of Galilee looks like, but no one's ever going to look at it with their eyes again. I myself don't believe that it is a painting anymore, because the thieves cut these paintings out of their frames. That's why you can see an empty frame when you get to the top of the Gardner Museum. They cut the paintings out of their frames and rolled them up in order to get them out of the building. And these are sometimes hundreds of years old paintings with varnish, sometimes multiple layers of varnish on them. And you painters out there will know what can happen to a canvas if you roll it up when it's like that. One person who was tangentially connected with the investigation 20 years ago believed that he had seen these paintings, or what was left of them, in plastic bags, and said that it looked like cornflakes. It looked like a bag full of black and white cornflakes. And the person who said that, the particular person who said that, was a goon. He was a Goomba. He was a leg breaker. Didn't have any kind of intelligence, certainly didn't have any knowledge of painting, and would not have come up with that as a description if he hadn't seen it, in my opinion. So I don't think these paintings, maybe the physical objects that we're taking might be recovered, but the paintings, I think, are gone forever. And there have been really good books on art theft, including a couple of really good books on the Gardner theft. The titles are escaping me at the moment, but I've written about them. I'll try to remember to leave a link to my reviews of whatever I can think of. Let's see here. Justin Raymond, you did the Proust questionnaire. Care to take on the Colbert questionnaire? Oh, right. Yes, I saw this in my comments field. Apparently there's a thing that Stephen Colbert did, his version of the Proust questionnaire, and it's great. So I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to separate it and do a video on it, because the questions are terrific. So we'll just move on to Vodka Breath. Hi, Steve. I'd like your opinion on the essays of Joan Didion. Do you have a favorite book of hers? I think she's great. Somewhat predictably, I think Slouching Towards Bethlehem is my favorite book of hers. But I think she's just great overall. Very happy to reread her, which is a kind of an acid test for essays like that for me. Alan Kean says, Steve, I am a semi-lurker, but here we go with my first question on this channel. Tolstoy or Dostoevsky? I am slogging through War and Peace right now, and it's been on my mind. Tolstoy, for me, hands down. Hands down. And your slogging through War and Peace might be fixable if one of my booktube dreams could come true, and we could somehow arrange a 50-channel read-along of War and Peace. Really slow, over a long period, 50 channels. That is a dream for me. That would be so incredible to do. let's see. How are we doing for time? Oh my, oh, we're out of time. All right, let's move on to part 3.